On the morning of November 12, 1845, at precisely 6:47 a.m., Thomas Lowe stood at the window of his lodging at 32 Narrow Marsh, Nottingham, watching the November sun climb above the rooftops of the city's industrial heart. 34 years old, 11 years working the twist-net machines, hands scarred from 10,000 caught threads. The light coming through that window wasn't free. He paid 2 pence per hour for it, measured by a landlord who tracked the sun's position with a pocket watch and a carpenter's square. When shadows crossed a chalk line on the floor, the rate changed. When clouds blocked the light entirely, Thomas still paid. The window faced south, and south-facing windows commanded premium rates regardless of weather. This wasn't metaphor. This wasn't poetic exaggeration about industrial exploitation. In the lace-making districts of Nottingham between 1820 and 1860, men and women literally rented access to daylight by the hour because their survival depended on light they could not afford to generate themselves. The city had transformed. In 1760, Nottingham held 17,000 people and produced stockings on hand frames, quiet work done in cottages with natural rhythms. By 1845, the population exceeded 53,000, and the lace machines changed everything. John Heathcote's bobbin-net machine, patented in 1809, could produce in a single day what took a hand. Worker 2 months. John Lever's refined it further in 1813, creating the Lever's machine that produced patterned lace of extraordinary complexity. These machines stood 9 feet tall, weighed 1,200 pounds, required constant attention, and operated best in consistent, strong light. But the machines belonged to manufacturers. The buildings belonged to landlords. The light belonged to whoever controlled the windows. Thomas Lowe didn't own his machine. He rented it from Joseph Pickering and Sons for 15 shillings per week, payable in advance every Monday morning. The machine occupied 48 square feet of floor space in a converted warehouse on Beller Gate, subdivided into individual workshops barely larger than prison cells. 27 men worked in that building, each paying rent for machine space, each paying separately for window access, each paying for the privilege of working 16 hours a day producing lace they'd never own. The window rent system emerged from pure economics and architectural limitation. Nottingham's Lace District, the Narrow Marsh, Broad Marsh, and Sneinton areas, consisted of medieval streets never designed for industrial buildings. Warehouses rose 4 and 5 stories tall on plots barely 30 feet wide. Interior spaces received no natural light. Windows facing streets commanded value because they provided the only free illumination available. Candles cost money. Tallow candles, sold for 3d per pound, provided approximately 7 hours of light and produced smoke that damaged the delicate threads. Spermaceti candles burned cleaner but cost 8d per pound. Oil lamps required fuel. Colza oil cost 2 shillings per gallon, whale oil even more. Gas lighting existed in Nottingham by 1823, but installation required capital investment in pipes and fixtures that most landlords refused to make. Gas also required monthly payments to the Nottingham Gas Light Company at rates that made candles look economical. Daylight was free. Windows were not. A south-facing window in a lace workshop rented for anywhere from 1 shilling 6d to 3 shillings per week, depending on size and building location. But landlords quickly realized they could extract more by hourly rates tied to the sun's actual position. The system worked like this. The workday began at dawn, whenever dawn occurred by season. November dawn came around 7 a.m. June dawn arrived before 4:30 a.m. A landlord or his agent would mark the floor with chalk lines corresponding to shadow positions throughout the day. As the sun moved, shadows moved. When your shadow crossed into the next zone, your hourly rate changed. Morning light cost less, 2d or 3d per hour. Midday light, when the sun stood highest and brightest, cost 4 pence or 5 pence per hour. Afternoon light decreased in price as the sun declined. Some landlords charged by 15-minute increments. Some measured by shadow length instead of time. Some simply watched through keyholes and knocked when they believed an hour had elapsed. Thomas Lowe worked from dawn until 10 p.m. most days, 17 hours when orders demanded it. He could afford window light for perhaps 6 hours. The rest he worked by candlelight, purchasing tallow candles from the building's landlord at marked-up prices, burning through 3 of candles per evening. On winter days with heavy clouds, he sometimes paid for window access, but burned candles anyway because the diffused light wasn't sufficient for the detailed work of mending broken threads or adjusting the machine's 1,400 individual bobbins. His weekly expenses looked like this. Machine rent, 15 shillings. Window rent, roughly 9 shillings for 6 hours per day across a 6-day work week. Candles, approximately 18 pence per week. Thread and materials supplied by the manufacturer but deducted from his piece rate payments. Housing, 4 shillings for a room shared with 2 other lace workers. Food, whatever remained, usually 7 to 9 shillings if the week went well. Total outgoings, roughly 39 shillings against average weekly earnings of 42 shillings when orders were strong. 3 shillings margin for savings, clothing, medical needs, everything else. But the light rent system created perverse incentives. Winter reduced daylight hours. November provided perhaps 9 hours of usable sunlight. December and January, sometimes only 8. Lace workers responded by working faster during daylight hours, sacrificing quality for speed. Manufacturers responded by implementing quality standards and financial penalties. A piece rejected for quality defects meant no payment at all, and the worker still owed machine rent and window rent for the time spent producing it. The system pressured workers into impossible calculations. Work faster in available light and risk quality rejections. Work more carefully and burn expensive candles for additional hours. Stop working early and lose potential income. Every choice cost money. Sarah Booth understood this completely. 28 years old, 7 years operating a small levers machine in a narrow marsh workshop, supporting 2 children after her husband died in a factory accident in 1842. She couldn't afford window rent at all. Her workspace sat in the back of a converted stable 15 feet from the nearest window. She worked entirely by candlelight, burning through nearly a pound of tallow candles per week at 3 pence per pound, plus lamp oil when she could afford it. Her children carried water, wound bobbins, and ran errands for other workers to contribute pennies to the household. Sarah's situation wasn't unusual. Women in Nottingham's lace trade earned roughly 60% of male rates for equivalent work. Piece rates calculated at lower values despite identical output. A complex piece of levers lace that paid a man 8 pence might pay a woman 5 pence. The machines didn't care about gender. The manufacturers did. She started work at 5 a.m. and finished around 11 p.m., 18 hours interrupted only for meals eaten at the machine. Her workshop held 11 other women in similar circumstances, all working by candlelight, all watching their wages erode through rental fees and material costs. The building's landlord, a former framework knitter named William Carver, who had invested in property during the lace boom, charged each woman 3 pence per day for workspace, not machine. Rental, just the physical space to exist while operating machines they rented from manufacturers. Carver owned 14 buildings in the narrow marsh. His annual rental income exceeded £600, substantial wealth extracted from workers who earned £1 to £2 per week. He answered complaints about conditions with simple mathematics. If you can't afford the rent, someone else will take your space. By 1845, Nottingham had approximately 1,200 lace machines operated by people who didn't own them, generating work for nearly 8,000 people, including thread makers, finishers, menders, and auxiliary workers. For every person who couldn't pay rent, 3 stood ready to try. The window rent system reached its apex in winter. December 1845 brought heavy snowfall and persistent cloud cover. Between December 8th and December 19th, Nottingham experienced only 4 days with more than 3 hours of strong sunlight. Lace workers faced a choice: pay for window access during cloudy days when the light barely helped, or work entirely by candles and lamps at greater expense. Thomas Lowe chose a third option. On December 11th, he stopped renting window access entirely. He repositioned his machine near the workshop's single window and worked only during the brightest midday hours when enough light spilled into the room without requiring direct window access. His productivity dropped by approximately 40%. His income dropped proportionally, but his expenses dropped faster. It was a gamble that others couldn't take. Workers with families, with debts, with obligations. They had to maintain productivity regardless of cost. Thomas lived alone, ate little, and had spent the previous summer saving every possible penny. He could survive a reduced income winter. Most couldn't. The manufacturers noticed. By January 1846, Joseph Pickering and Sons sent notices to workers: maintain minimum weekly output or lose machine rental agreements. The company didn't care about window rent or candle costs. They cared about delivery schedules and customer orders. If you couldn't produce sufficient lace, they'd rent the machine to someone who could. Thomas increased his hours, working from 4 a.m. until midnight, burning through candles, watching his savings evaporate. By February, he'd spent everything he'd saved and borrowed 3 shillings from another worker. By March, he owed 8 shillings and couldn't make machine rent. On March 23, 1846, Joseph Pickering and Sons terminated his rental agreement and leased the machine to Robert Mills, age 24, recently arrived from Derby, willing to work 20-hour days at piece rates 10% lower than Thomas had been earning. Thomas found work as a bobbin winder at 4d per day, a job usually performed by children. Sarah Booth lasted longer through sheer endurance. Time equals 350 milliseconds, but broke her health doing it. By summer 1846, she was coughing constantly from months of breathing candle smoke and cotton fibers in unventilated rooms. By autumn, she couldn't work full days. By November, she'd moved in with her sister's family and taken in piecework that paid even less, mending damaged lace for a halfpenny per piece. The window rent system didn't collapse because of outrage or reform. It faded because technology made it obsolete. Gas lighting improved and became cheaper through the 1850s. The Nottingham Gas Light Company expanded service and reduced rates as competition emerged. By 1855, gas lamps cost roughly 3d per evening to operate, less than candles and lamp oil combined. Time equals 450 milliseconds. More importantly, gas provided consistent light regardless of time or weather. Landlords who'd extracted window rents found themselves competing with buildings that offered gas lighting included in overall rent. By 1860, window rents had largely disappeared, replaced by higher base rents that included utilities. Workers paid more overall, but at least the payment structure had become simpler and more predictable. The Lever's machines continued operating into the 20th century. Nottingham remained Britain's lace center for another 100 years, but the specific cruelty of renting daylight by the hour, of measuring a man's shadow to determine his hourly rate, of forcing women to choose between light and food, that particular innovation in exploitation lasted roughly 40 years before economic forces rendered it impractical. Thomas Lowe died in 1867 at age 56, listed in parish records as a framework knitter, a profession already obsolete. Sarah Booth lived until 1873, her death certificate noting chronic respiratory disease. Neither left significant records beyond census entries and occasional mentions in poor law documents. The buildings where they worked still stand in parts of Nottingham, converted to apartments and shops. Some still have the original windows, though nobody remembers the chalk lines on the floors or the landlords with pocket watches measuring the sun's arc. The machines are in museums now, impressive mechanical achievements, beautifully preserved. Beautifully. The informational plaques mention inventors and technical specifications and the global lace trade. They don't mention the cost of light. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about the real cost of industrial progress, about people who paid in shillings and pence for something that should have been free. Real people, real exploitation. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom? Time equals 250 milliseconds / Canada, Australia? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if your ancestors worked in textile industries. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Thomas Lowe and Sarah Booth don't disappear into silence. These workers deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.